Here we go. Hey, please welcome to the show, Leo and Zach. Hey guys, how are you?
What up?
Is
We're
there
good. Thank you for having us.
No, my pleasure. I was going to say, is there any issue in how you guys are introduced because you're so oftentimes linked together that it's Leo and Zach or Zach and Leo? Does one sound better? Or someone have a larger ego?
We like them. We like them both,
Okay.
but we
I think
often opt
people
for
say Zach,
alphabetical order.
but people say Zach and Leo, and I've thought about this because is two syllables, so it's easier to say the
Right,
first syllable
Zach and
first.
Leo and Zach and Leo. Yeah, it flows as like a combo first name. That definitely flows better. Zach and Leo.
You know what's interesting is, talking to you guys, obviously you're composers and have been composers for some time now. That do you find yourself even thinking of how things are spoken in a musical or lyrical way? Like you're almost checking the meter of it as we analyze Leo and Zach or Zach and Leo.
I
Leo's
don't know
more of
if
a
we're
poetry
like,
guy.
yeah, I don't know if we're like doing the meter, but I will say like you do kind of get attracted to just like things that have a rhythm to them, like all day, every day. I think at least.
Definitely.
Yeah. There does look, I'm going to get cosmic for a moment here. See, what does this have to do with the 1980s? Other than I was raised during that period, I guess. That music, obviously, there's a mathematical element to music, right? I mean, it's there is a 2 + 2 = 4. If you're in a certain key and you go certain one chord to another or root to another, there's only one or two other places you're going to go. Just generally speaking, it's mind blowing to me that it's so artistic and creative, but yet there's this kind of truth to it that's undeniable, like globally. Does that make sense?
It's funny you say that because I
Yeah.
actually often have this thought when I'm watching like a virtuosic player, that it's just the same 12 notes that I use, Like it's
Mhm.
just it's not as intimidating as when you think, or when I listen to a beautiful piece of music, I'm like, well, it's just the same 12 notes. Like it's available for me or for Leo or for you to like pick them up and write them and use them and stuff. And our journey like as composers is just figuring out the best way to use these notes. So it's actually I think about that all the time.
Damn, that's awesome. I need to think about that more.
Yeah.
I guess that would look. I grew up very anxiety prone. I'm on medication for it now, but it would almost give me the way you said it. Almost gives me like a feeling of like, well, what am I doing wrong? I have the same 12 notes as this guy. But no, the way you said it is far more empowering.
You just spend more time, like that person has just spent more time than you,
Yeah.
perhaps, you know?
So taking a step back, as you guys know, look, this show's generally about how the 1980s, certainly for my generation, but the other generations, continues to influence the music, the movies, literature today. Unfortunately, politics too, but we won't get into that for today. But you may be of a different generation, and that's fine. It doesn't matter. I'm curious, though. I mean, you're often curious this about our musical guests. Oftentimes, we're influenced by older folks in our families first, what they listen to, our parents or an older brother or sister, an uncle that gives us a record or something like that. What was the first music that you purchased for yourself? Okay, finally, I can get something for myself. It's download, a tape, a CD, whatever that may have been.
Zach is gonna have a real answer to this. He's like, I feel
I
like
am.
as a teen, you just had a much more curated record collection than me. Like I don't know, like my record cabinet's kind of a mess, and I grew up as a saxophone player, so like I don't know what my first album was, but it was probably like Miles Davis.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Mine was Enema of the State, Blink-182. And I was probably too young to have it, but my parents were really chill about parental advisory related stuff, and they gave it to me on Christmas. And if you remember the album cover, it's a very titillating album cover.
Right.
So I was like really excited to have that. But I will say, in terms of the 80s stuff too, like my mom always says the 80s was her decade. I think she just had an amazing time. And it's funny because I was born in the last couple months of 1989. So it's funny to hear her say the 80s were her decade because
Yeah.
like I wasn't
Yeah,
in them at
then
all.
you came then you came
And then
along and
I showed
ruined
up and ruined it. So, but
it.
she's a huge just 80s music head and introduced me very early on to like The Cure, and she specifically loved like The Specials and Madness and Men at Work and Duran Duran. Like those are her favorite bands. So I was always I got like they were always on in the car So I think that's kind of where it started for me.
And Leo, you're saying that maybe you don't, other than sax, and we're not talking about Tim Capella, the sexy saxophonist from Lost Boys, or
We can talk about him though.
We
We
He's
we
on Cobra
can't talk
Kai.
about him because he actually played on Cobra Kai.
is that right?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness!
Yes. There's
I
a
love
training montage in season 5 where Johnny is like cleaning the house, right, Zach?
Yeah. That's Tim.
Wow.
That's Tim.
Okay. Wow. We can get into Cobra Kai certainly, but I'm curious. I guess obviously, you folks, you've already touched upon the fact that you've had, you were into music before you were into composing. Is there what inspired you to want to be composers? I think I've heard somebody say this to me once that like all this is a generalization. All composers want to be rock stars, but only few rock stars want to be composers. What was it that inspired you to make the transition from maybe your love of pop music or popular music or playing the saxophone to scoring something?
I figured out sometime around the age of like 16 and a half, 17, that I enjoyed bossing people around way more than I enjoyed actually playing my instruments. And like I practiced. I didn't hate practicing. I liked performing. I actually still like performing. Like I did a lot of musical theater in high school too. But at some point I started doing arrangements for my like high school pep band that I was in charge of and jazz ensemble. And once I kind of opened that like thing and be like, oh, I can just like tell the trumpets to play this and tell the saxes to play this. It was just way more fun to kind of have that level of control over the sound than it was to actually play the stuff. And so that was it for me. Then I was like, you know what? I'm going to go study music theory in college.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for me, I love movies, and I know Leo does too. And I think I just at one point I had been writing music for my bands and just in general just exploring composition. And I think when I was around 13 or 14, I was just getting more into film, and I realized that I just love film music. So naturally, just tying it together. It's funny that you say that all rock stars want to be what was it, all rock stars want to be composers, or the other way
Yeah.
I
around?
think it's the other
No,
way around.
all
right?
composers want to be rock stars. I mean, this is very true. There's a lot of composers having severe public midlife crises where they're like trying to be rock stars. You can find
But
them
it
on the
is
internet
funny now
yourself.
that there are a lot of rock stars who honestly, bewilderingly to us, want to be composers. And like, like someone like Johnny Greenwood or something. Like there's a lot of new people who are like composers who are in bands who want to be getting notes from like music executives at Netflix. I'm like, why would you want to do that? Like, you're in a giant rock, you're in a band.
They don't realize that's most of the job.
Yeah. It's like, why do you want to get notes from people? That's interesting to me.
Thinking about that, and look, as you guys know, there's tons of folks that came up in the 70s and 80s as rockers or pop musicians that became composers. Danny Elfman, of course, notably Mark Mothersbaugh from Devo, Trent Reznor, Tangerine Dream was doing records before they did composing music. Do you have a favorite rocker or musician turned composer?
It's a good question.
I mean, Johnny Greenwood really crushes it in that department.
I love Tangerine
Phantom
Dream.
Thread. It's amazing.
Yeah, it is really good. Tangerine Dream, and I also like Toto's soundtracks. Like Toto's Dune soundtrack is pretty great.
Oh yeah.
And don't forget that Stuart Copeland, the drummer of the Police, did the score for the seminal 90s film Good Burger.
I'm glad you said don't forget, because I hadn't remembered that.
Yeah, there you go.
To jot that down. Hans Zimmer, even Hans Zimmer.
Yeah, he was a rocker.
He was in a band.
He was a rocker. I mean, he's the main guy who he was in the Buggles.
Yeah. You could see him in that music video, even that video Killed the Music Store.
Yeah.
A video. So okay, so look, I do know you guys met. My understanding is you both met working for another fantastic composer, Christoph Beck, my wife's favorite composer, film composer.
Oh.
How is it, oftentimes, and I think about maybe it's a union rule, you've got one name there, as the composer, but somehow you guys are helping? What is it? Are you taking leitmotifs? You take this one, or there's a scene I can't crack, or is it a matter of resources or time that you're helping with arrangements?
All of the above. There are no union rules because composers are not unionized, and it is like a very that has to do with like songwriter laws
Hmm.
that exist in the
Okay.
United States. Composers are not allowed to be unionized. The
Wow.
best way to describe it is it's like an old school apprentice system, and like we might as well like we could be talking about like being shoe cobblers, like in the way that I think the experience is depending on who you work for, it's going to be totally different. Our experience with Chris was a little all of the above, just because that's his personality. And so, like, you start pretty raw and inexperienced, and you might just be making coffee or, updating timings. There's a lot of logistical work in film scoring. And, kind of the first thing you got to know is like how to do all of that. And so like there's a lot of clerical work involved, and that might involve like, that might turn into conforming things to picture. Because one thing when you're working on TV and movies, you're constantly getting updated cuts, and you may have written music that then needs to be adjusted to the cuts. So you might start doing that. You might start addressing notes. Then you might start arranging existing themes and then writing. It's a very natural progression, I think. But it totally depends whose studio you're working in. Every single composer in Hollywood has a team behind them, because, like I said, there's just a lot of logistical and clerical stuff, and a lot of work that has to be done to get something on screen. It's the same as like a VFX department almost. It's just music.
Wow, I had no idea. I had no reason to suspect that. Um, so at some point, you guys figure out, or you begin collaborating. What is it? Look, I guess to the point of look, we're talking about. Christoph Beck is the credit on there. So most oftentimes we see singular composers on films. There are several duos, obviously, and other combinations of folks who write for TV and film. But how do you figure out you can work together in this kind of seemingly otherwise maybe
Well,
solitary?
we had no choice to
Oh,
work
okay.
together at first because we were working for Chris. So we were in the trenches together, and we just so happened to be like really good partners
Mm.
together just while we were working for Chris. And Chris had a great team. There are a few people who we're still very good friends with who also worked there. And when you find someone who you work that well with, you just kind of tend to stick with them. I think it's a rare thing. It's the same with like being in a band, with finding people you jive with, who you can be completely vulnerable with and feel comfortable and trust. So I think there were opportunities for us, as we like spread our wings away from Chris's studio, that we just both felt we could do really well together. And we often talk about how we're surprised there just aren't more collaborations in this world, because you just get two cool composer brains for the price of one, and we come up with great ideas together. And it's very like, even the other day we were doing something, I don't even think it was composer related. We were like coming up with an idea for like a content video, and we're just like spitballing. It's like being in a writer's room, which we
Mm.
don't do. Like, we're in our own studio, but we have that same dynamic where each of us brings ideas to the table. And it's incredibly beneficial. Like, the music really, it helps the music.
Right. Yeah, it must be because like what you're saying, it's just a rare thing to find. Look, it's if you're in a relationship, it's hard to find a relationship, with a partner that you sort of have
Yeah.
the vibe with. But even on
Yeah.
an artistic or a work thing, it's seems like lightning in a bottle, sort of. At some point, look, you guys both have your careers working independently. You collaborate, obviously. I think the first was the first film you did together, F the Prom. I think maybe.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good homework.
Uh, I've never seen it, but it's
Don't worry
probably
about it.
probably wasn't made for me. I don't think.
Yeah.
And
I
that's
think it is
okay.
on Netflix though.
Oh, is that right? Okay. Um,
I do have a friend who like tells me his wife just loves that movie.
all right.
Yeah.
Actually, you know what? Thinking about before that, slightly thinking about working for. I was just going to lead into Christoph or Cobra Kai, how you get the job, but thinking about Christoph Beck or Chris Beck, as you guys can call him. That I was thinking about friends of mine who are actors. They may have a small part in a film, or I had some friends that had a song in a film. They're a rock band. They go to the movie and that scene comes up and they're like, okay, here it is. Oh, look at that. All right. So you do a few bars, I guess, for Chris Beck. Is it, hey guys, did you hear that little flutter there? That was my piece. Is that an experience you can?
That's real.
Oh yeah, the first time
That
for
is
sure.
real. I
Yeah.
went and saw Hangover 3 with my dad because that was the first movie that I worked on with Chris, and I was like 22 or whatever, and I had one. I don't even know if Leo remembers the cue that I did in that, but it was
I
like
have no
one.
idea.
It was like called Alan Cries, Leo, and it was like a
Oh
sad piano
yeah.
thing for like 20 seconds, and I went with my dad to the theater, and it's in the first like 10 minutes of the movie, and I was like, yo, what's up? And he was like patting me on the back, and
Aw,
like
that's
it's
wow.
real, but like
Yeah, that's great.
like I often actually try to remember that feeling, at least, even with we've had a lot of success, and a lot of people have heard our music, and I still try to remember that we're very fortunate that people
Oh yeah.
even hear this stuff. So that is a real thing, though, what you described.
Leo, have you done that?
Oh, of course. I think the first like cue I had was in the Muppets movie from 2011 or 12, whenever that came out. It was literally 4 seconds long. Like a character like looked up from a desk and there was a little like doo loop thing. Like some things went high, some things went up, some things went down, and like that was it. And that was my first one. And then I also remember randomly like one day I just got like a royalty check from Ireland specifically that was for like several $1,000s, and it was only
Wow.
that cue. And I have no idea why that is to this day because the math has never worked out. And so like I'm always like, wow, that's like the gift the universe gave me
Yeah.
when I was like very poor in my 20s.
Yeah. And I would make a dumb American joke and say, like, maybe it was Irish dollars is why it seemed like
Yeah, right, right.
I don't know.
Irish dollars.
All right. So look, so at some point you guys, you begin working on Cobra Kai, but not before you get the offer and get the job. What is how does that happen?
That's a great question because what happened never happens and probably won't happen again. We read about Cobra Kai in Variety when there was like an announcement in the trades about the show. We had at this point it was being developed for YouTube because it had a whole life on YouTube before it moved to Netflix, where most people saw it. And we had just done another YouTube show called Sing It, and we were looking for another gig to collaborate on. We saw this announcement about Cobra Kai and thought, hey, that would be a fun match for us. We knew nothing about the show in terms of like there was nothing that Ralph Macchio and Billy Zabka were in it. We thought it might have been some kind of reboot, but like I don't know, it seemed like it'd be fun for us. So we put a reel together on pure spec, no, just kind of what we felt in our hearts might be appropriate that we had written. Sent it to our agent and said, get this into somebody's hands who's involved in Cobra Kai. I have no idea to this day how he did that, but like several months later, the creators, John, Josh, and Hayden, reached out to us about a meeting because they had heard this reel, and they sent us the script. When we read the script, it was so clear how amazingly special the show was. And like, it's bringing back all these characters. It's treating it with like such respect. And we went in, we had a meeting with John, Josh, and Hayden. We clicked with them immediately about vision for the show, had like a super enthusiastic talk, left the meeting, and like 10 minutes later got a call that they hired us.
Wow.
That does not happen in Hollywood. It's normally like pulling teeth and you never hear back about anything ever, unless it's to like get kicked in the freaking nuts.
Do you remember what that reel was like? Is it so far off from what you wound up doing, or are you riffing on Bill Conti, or?
It's not far off at all. I think
Okay.
I don't quite remember what was on it. There was definitely some 80s kind of stuff for sure. What else was on there?
Probably some big action music.
Yeah. We had big action music for sure. We had like stuff from Edge of Tomorrow on there.
Yeah.
And but yeah, I think we just, the general vibe was like, we just think it should be connected to the 80s at some capacity.
Right.
And this was without knowing that had anything to do with the original
Right.
movie.
Right.
Right. You know that, yeah. It sound look, I don't know. We don't know if anybody else sent them a reel or they had some other
Yeah, we have
composers in
no
mind,
idea.
but the fact that obviously now we've seen the show, it's in the can, it's done, that it aligns so perfectly with that idea, you know, this still touching on the old of that, advancing it forward into contemporary. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, perfect alignment there. So were you guys fans of the original films? Had you seen them? Did you have any feeling particularly about the original films before that?
I mean, the original film is one of those movies that, so Zach and I were born in the late 80s, so we really grew up in the 90s. And
Sure.
in the 90s, that movie was just always on cable, like
Right.
always, especially the first one. So, like, you know, you go over to a sleepover, you put the TV on, Karate Kid's probably on. Like, I would say I've seen that movie like 100 times, but like only probably once sitting down from beginning to end, watching it as intended. Yeah, like,
Yeah.
and normally it's just like, oh, the Karate Kid's on. Like, let's watch that.
It was just on at a bar we were at a couple months ago. They were just
Oh
playing
yeah,
the Karate Kid
Right.
at the bar. Yeah. I didn't have as much of a connection to it. I felt like I knew that we were both very familiar with the music, and I don't even necessarily mean the Conti score. In fact, we were not really familiar with the Conti score, but
yeah.
we were very familiar with the songs. We were very familiar with, like, you know, "You're the Best Around"
Right.
and "Young Hearts" and "Bananarama" and stuff like that. Like, we were familiar way more with that side of the soundtrack.
Right. Is it for kids of my generation? That was a pivotal film because it hit certainly again, folks are more closely to my age even at the right age. I was around the Karate Kid's age when it came out, or Daniel character's age at the round it came out. Are there films? What were the films then for you that were pivotal for you when you were younger like that? Something that really, I don't know,
Hmm.
sparked something with you emotionally or inspired you in some way, or maybe changed your world philosophy?
I mean, I'm a Star Wars nerd. Oh, Jurassic Park was like a huge
Okay.
freaking movie for me. Um,
Hmm.
what else?
Pirates of the
Well,
Caribbean for me, that was,
yeah,
I mean,
Lord
I
of the
just, like,
Rings.
loved Jack Sparrow.
Hmm.
Yeah, Lord of the Rings, where, I mean, we were, like, 11, 12 when Lord of the
Sure.
Rings came out.
Yeah, that, I mean, that was insane.
Um, I also have, like, really, I don't know, like, there's, like, certain action like, The Matrix, like,
Yeah,
and
oh
again, I
yeah.
was, like, probably too young to see The Matrix when I saw it, but, like, that definitely also got me just really interested in movies, and I loved the vibe of it. Um, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it's
But definitely Jack
interesting.
Sparrow.
Yeah, the movies you picked are like, Star Wars of those generations. Like Lord of the Rings is Star
Right,
Wars for
right,
your
right.
generation. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
Star Wars is Star Wars for for a lot of people still too.
Yeah.
Um, and obviously John. I'm thinking about the music in particular. John Williams, obviously, I mean, absolute legend. The amount of how
Best in the business.
prolific he was. That was the movie for me when I was a kid. I was very small. Close Encounters was the first movie that I thought I realized there
Mm.
was music. And I remember running home to my Schroeder-sized piano and just trying to plunk out that, theme like
Dun,
6
dun,
or 7.
dun, dun, dun.
I probably completely screwed it up, I'm sure, but
Have you seen the John Williams doc? Leo, you've seen the John Williams
Yeah,
documentary?
yeah,
no, I
And
haven't
they
seen it. Yeah.
show, it's an amazing document that they have, but John Williams is just showing Steven Spielberg this piece of paper that has like 40 different variations of the
Oh,
5 note
wow.
theme. And it's just, and then there's a circle around the one that's selected. It's just kind of like, damn, that's crazy.
Yeah.
That's like,
yeah.
that's like that's an insane document to just be holding. I don't know. I
All right,
love
I
that.
wanna pause that now and hear what the other ones are.
Right, exactly.
See
I'm
how
sure
you
someone has done that,
yeah,
paused it and
how you arrive at that.
put it on YouTube.
So, Cobra Kai is an amazing television show, and, part of that is obviously the work that you did. There's I'm trying to think. Recently, I saw a film where I think it was an '80s movie even, and I thought, but for the score, it would be a fantastic movie. Oh, you know what? This is really obscure.
Mm.
It's the movie Real Men. You probably never seen it. Stars Jim Belushi and, John Ritter. Fantastic movie. The score sounds like, circus music almost because it's got this kinda dark comedy to it, so it had a legit straight up just orchestral score. I think it would have been even more, it had been better. Why do I say that? I say that all because the show is successful in part because of the work that you guys did.
Thank you.
I can't even imagine how you approach it. Um, are you coming up with, themes and leitmotifs based on characters and some of the themes for the show before you even start seeing, dailies or seeing completed episodes, or are you only inspired after you start seeing what the work's being done on set?
It's the latter. We do not start writing anything in any episode until after we have seen like a fully edited version of the episode. It might not be the final,
Okay.
but we sit there and spot it with the showrunners. And that's the first time we see it. And we like that real time reaction we get to not knowing, because the show obviously has a lot of twists and turns, and sort of
Right.
us experiencing them is often very informative for how we then decide to emphasize and play things in the score to like help the storytelling. Um, there are tons and tons and tons and tons of themes in Cobra Kai, in leitmotifs, but we don't write them ahead of time. We like usually we're working on a scene that, and a theme just kind of comes naturally, and we might not even realize it's a theme until an episode or two later when we want to connect something to that scene and use some material or reinvent some material. So I think the themes have kind of grew really organically over those early seasons and later seasons. And so I think that is kind of why it is so strong and recognizable, because we weren't trying to force like this one's Miguel's theme, like we're gonna like
Mm.
shove it down your throat every time he's on screen. Instead, a lot of the themes involve, I don't know, certain emotions or situations or rivalries or dojos. Like they're all over the place, but I think we just kind of lead with the needs of the scene first,
Yeah.
and it made everything fit really naturally.
Do you have a shorthand then, or do you have this written script in front of you that you're noting, or you're recording your voice to remember the things that you were hearing or feeling at the time? Or
We have little notes like that we take after the spotting session. We have like it's called QDB. It's just like where we notch all the different starts, and then in there we'll put something like maybe one of us will say, "Oh, hey, in that section, like let's use this theme." Like just that's my idea, or I have an idea for that one. Just jot a little note. But honestly, sometimes once we start, that all goes out the window. We don't even look at the notes
Yeah,
half the time. It's just gut.
right, and do you have do you have folks now like you did when you worked for Christoph Beck that are
We
helping
do.
fill in the yeah,
We have a great
getting
team.
yeah.
Cobra Kai though, like
Although
me and
nobody really
Leo,
touches Cobra Kai.
no one
Yeah,
touches Cobra, and that's like we have a team. Like we have other projects. I guess we had other projects during the time of Cobra Kai, and we have a few other TV shows, and they really help us like just keep all the trains going. But
everything
Cobra
moving.
Kai is
Our
very much
baby.
kind of our child that we watch over. So we've been very, and it's by far the most labor intensive.
Mhm. Is there some sort of I don't know, how do I say this? I guess you have to do you have to deal with management or any of the producers whom you mentioned that when to decide to pull in one of the motifs from an earlier film for a character or a scene?
Oh, sometimes the showrunners, John, Josh, and Hayden, have ideas like that. Sometimes they use some music from the original film, like the original recordings, which I think is actually important because it like really creates a sonic connection for the audience to like identify stuff. I mean, they usually only do that in scenes where there's using footage from the original films. Um, but they typically write that stuff into the script. It's kind of like decided and designed way
Oh,
ahead of time. Um,
We did end up having
and they're
like
the
a very
final say, John, Josh, and Hayden. Like there's
oh
no
yeah,
on
yeah.
this one, there's no other random studio notes and stuff that comes down, at
oh,
least as far as music.
We had a pretty good musical shorthand too, where like they would say, "Oh, maybe let's do a little bit of Conti style," like, and that didn't mean do Conti or take a Conti melody. It just we like Leo and I had developed our own type of like Conti sound, which was
mhm.
just more orchestra or the certain type of delicate orchestra or something for those moments. But it wasn't very often where they said like use this original theme, and we made a lot of new themes for legacy characters like Johnny as a theme, Daniel as a theme, Terry Silver as a theme, Kreese as a theme that were not existing in the original trilogy.
Right, and how
Yagi too.
yeah. So yeah, so many. My ear is always open for like little Easter eggs and things that are just reminiscent of something. And certainly in Cobra Kai, I was rewarded plenty of times with the stuff that you worked in there. Do you think that should people, huh? Should people notice the work of the composer, or maybe it depends on the genre whether or not they should, because in Cobra Kai the music is so strong that I don't want to say this. This sounds like I don't know, platitude might not be the right word. It's like when people say New York is a character. The city itself is a character in the story. No, New York is the I don't know what that means, and I've lived there. I don't know what that means. But the music itself is is a character of sorts. I mean, it's but anyway. So should people notice, or maybe that's
I don't know if in this show the answer is yes, they should
okay.
notice. I agree. I think the show, the prescription of music use in the show that is agreed on by all parties is that it kind of only works with the music. Like you need to play these stakes as real and authentic as possible because the plot of the show is like so ridiculous. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. The music gives you permission to buy into it. I think as a broader question, um, you can't really say should about any individual property. I think it's kind of it's really up to the director in the end of the day, like how they want to use music in their project. And I think not everyone is necessarily can answer that question who directs movies. And sometimes they really don't want to rely on music, but then you see the movie and I think to myself, man, they really probably should have like this could have used like a heavier hand scoring or like it sounds like they were afraid of scoring it a little bit and that's not necessarily on the composer and sometimes you think like wow they like really swung for it but like maybe the composer like wasn't quite up for that task or like they didn't quite know how to do it like I think where scores don't work there's usually an incongruity between kind of what the needs of the project, what maybe the direction of the project was, and what the composer provided. And like any that triangle, if it gets out of weight
Mm,
anywhere, it kind of collapses on itself. A lot of times I like watching movies when I don't really notice the music, but that doesn't mean that the movie's not relying on the music. It just means that it's working so well that for once in my life I can turn my brain off and just enjoy the music like the movie
mhm.
in a holistic sense but that might mean that it's like really up front and center and making like just a big cinematic impression. Um, I don't know. That was a little philosophizing. Zach, do
No,
you have
I love
anything
it.
to
No, that
add?
was great. I completely agree.
yeah. In Cobra Kai specifically, thinking about there's different. Obviously, there's characters that are folks familiar with, but part of that is you're dealing with different cultures. You've got the Okinawan culture, you've got Miguel and his family, and that sort of Latin culture. You're dealing with trying to throw back to the '80s, try to keep things contemporary. Is there a vocabulary you have to develop? Is there research that has to be done to know how to authentically maybe represent certain sounds, or
Well, when it comes to the 80s, we're pretty good at it.
you
I
got your
think
10,000
like
Zach,
hours?
especially. Zach
well,
knows the
yeah,
80s.
but now Leo does too for sure. But like I think that we clicked with really quickly and I think we very early on knew that we wanted to do something that was like authentically 80s in a lot of way which you just don't hear on it's just kind of like a bastardized version of it on
Yeah.
TV or something. So that was really important to us and I think like the other type of like cultural awareness things like for example, the one that we actually really like, there's not a ton of like say Latin type of music, but I would say the one thing that we took a lot of care in is in season 6, there's a whole Korean subplot
Right.
and we wanted to incorporate Korean instruments as like a part of this new dojo, the Korean Cobra Kai dojo sound. And we found this amazing instrumentalist named Luna Lee who plays an instrument called the gayagum, which is like a very long koto looking style Korean stringed instrument. And not only that, but she plays like rock and roll covers on her gayagum. So like
Oh, I
she
think I've seen
she
her. Is
pl-
she like really
yeah, she
popular on
plays like
TikTok?
Thunderstruck. Yes,
Yes.
she's
Oh, I
like
Yeah,
love
yeah.
I love her
and
stuff.
like AC other ACDC and Led Zeppelin and whatever. And we go, okay, well, she's perfect for this. and she plays all over the score, and she has like a featured solo in one of like the biggest fights of the season. So that was and we used some other instruments too, and that was really, really fun for us, especially in season 6 when like we're like, how are we gonna escalate this score? We've done so many episodes of this show. Like we gotta keep changing and keep evolving. I don't know, is there anything else, Leo?
I was just gonna say, I think we maybe just personality wise like to do research when we go into projects and like kind of
Yeah.
delve in. Like, I mean, there were a lot of times on Cobra Kai where I found myself like digging through liner notes of like old albums to figure out like what synth sounds were existed, and that's kind of how you like learn the 80s palette or like the Korean stuff. Like we did a lot of research on that. You know, we consulted they go to Okinawa. Chosen becomes a kind of bigger character throughout the show, who's kind of like a more of a connection to Japan, and we like consulted with some Japanese musicians on that. Like we like, I just think we like the research part of it, because then you just have more info at your disposal. Like the more tools in your box, like kind of the more creative you can be breaking the rules of what you can do with these things.
I know you guys got to run, so I'll just ask one last question because you mentioned about the '80s thing. Did you have a go-to '80s synth that you were sound?
Yes. Let's say it at the same time. 3, 2, 1.
Korg M1.
Okay, all right.
The Korg
Might
M1
have
is
been off
at
there.
the heart of Cobra Kai, especially the like the piano sound. And there's another preset that's like kind of like a piano Rhodes combo that gets used a lot in Cobra Kai.
Yeah. There's a pan flute, like a synth pan
Yeah.
flute too.
Yeah.
And yeah, we were using that. I mean, basically since season 1, it's
You
just like
can't use the M1 on any other TV show.
Yeah,
Like it doesn't, like you just can't use it. No one's ever going to let us use it again.
yeah, unless you're scoring like a 1994 episode of The Next Generation, like you can maybe use it, but that time has passed.
Yes.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm grateful for your time today, guys. I remember seeing the first episode of the show, which was some time ago now, but again, the music was how do I say this? It was so authentic, I should say, authentic to the world of that, which again threaded this crazy needle of balancing what I grew up listening to in the 1980s and lived during the era of the first film coming out, but fit for the particular show. I remember that first episode. Again, I haven't seen it in so long, but I remember feeling like it was near like a music video at times, especially with Johnny and some of his
It's
stuff.
so loud.
Oh yeah.
In such a
Super
way
loud.
that I just connected with, and I remember just being thrilled that was yet to come. And again, it was a large part in due to, in fact, the music you guys created. So thank you
That
so
means
much.
a lot. Thank
Wait,
you.
I actually want to
Yeah.
prompt one more question before we wrap
Okay,
this
yeah.
conversation up, because we were kind of talking about it pre-show, which is that like, and I think Zach has given this a lot of thought in his creative life, so maybe he can kick us off. Like, what makes the '80s the '80s in like an artistic ethos sense? Like, why is it that the '80s has this sort of eternal '80s-ness to it that differentiates it from what happened in the '90s, what happened in the '70s? But it's not a technical question. It's like
Right.
it's a philosophy question. It's an artistic question. Like, why do we think that is?
I want to hear your answer first, because you host the '80s podcast.
Well, and I guess I feel like the first thing I would be going to is a technical one, but which so I'm trying to think more philosophically here. For me, and maybe this is too broad, but for me, the 1980s, became this sort of because of globalization, really, that was happening in the 1980s, where we had like you're saying, Zach, your mom's favorite bands are almost everyone you named was the
UK.
second wave of the British invasion
Yeah.
kind of band. But this isn't really why. It's almost hard to put your finger on it. This is why I think it's such an important decade musically, was because of the diversity that we had suddenly, because we able to incorporate sounds from other places, and the development of technology, which is a technical thing, which obviously we're able to do things that we couldn't. But and again, maybe the spirit of it, and this isn't getting to it. Sounds technical almost. is the DIY nature that I think is consistent with kids who grew up in the 1980s and adults and musicians, because suddenly, because of the advances of technology, adding sounds to garage bands that you weren't heretofore able to have was a phenomenon. And throw in hip hop artists, producing
Yeah.
on their kitchen tables with a with a synthesizer sampler and a turntable. But that's all technical. What is the ethos of it? I don't know. Or maybe that wasn't how you phrased it. And maybe it even isn't limited to the music, because, and honestly, I try to separate me from this nostalgia of it, but there seems like something magical about the combination of so many things, including the music of that era, that feels different and special to me. And I want to argue that's an objective statement, but I'm not sure. You guys are from a different generation, so what do you think?
I mean, I often think about, why am I attracted to the 80s so much when I just wasn't alive in that era at
Yeah.
all? And there's something that is really interesting what you said from the technical standpoint, that like there was just not the technology to make the art, in 1979 compared to 1980. So, or 1981 or whatever. There
Yeah.
was just different. So there is just such a clear representation of that music. When you hear it, it's so identifiable. I just think that there's some earnestness that is captured in the 1980s ethos that is very hard to recreate. And maybe it's a time of, I use this phrase often, of post nostalgia, of like remembering what you think nostalgia is.
Mm.
I think about that with synthwave,
I was going to say that. Yeah.
right, like, which I wrote synthwave for a long time, and that kind of like transferred into Cobra Kai a bit, but the 1980s version that is encapsulated in a modern synthwave is not really what the 1980s sounded like. It's just what is filtered through the nostalgic brain, art brain. And I think whatever it is, like, we all develop kind of our musical sense and our artistic senses, like, I think the most when we're youngest. Like, I literally just heard Nick Cave talking about this in a book I'm reading, about how, like, between 10 and 22 is when you like really form your musical personality, and you
Right.
never really go from that. um and I just think for a lot of people, there's so much great art that came from the 80s that it just sticks with people. But it's a grand question, and one that us truth seekers will always be trying to discover.
Yeah. I'd like
I'll
to get
take a
my,
stab at
okay. Yep.
some
Go
stuff.
for it.
Well, one, I think the technological thing is like the word that we've been dancing around is digital. Like when you hit the
Hmm.
80s, the all the instruments and stuff, they start to have digital components. Like synthesizers before that were analog circuits, and suddenly you're like recording noise and like playing it back, or like using a computer to make music, which changes the sound and also accessibility. I think the somewhere along the line, I was like, I don't know, reading something that was arguing that we tend to have like 30-year cultural, socio-political cycles for whatever reason.
Right.
And if you buy into that, the 80s lands as like kind of the culmination of post World War II world order. And like you have someone who's born in 1950, when they hit 1980, they're 30. They're like prime of their life. Like if they're working, they've like paid the dues, so they're like starting to, if they're a studio engineer or something, they're like getting the real gigs now, getting to play in their own sandbox. And I just think the 80s was kind of this like, I don't know, culmination of the post World War II, Cold War, US centric like order, in a way that created this like sense of like, I don't know, unbridled like heart, like reality hadn't been set in yet. It was like this like, we
Yeah.
did it, like we're crushing it, like everything's good news, even though like obviously that's not true, but kind of in this like I don't know, headline way, maybe it was. Um, and I think you could like argue that we've like hit the end of one of those now. Like, then we had the 90s, the 2000s, the 2010s, and then like, COVID reset us in 2020. And now we're at like the start of maybe another 30-year
Mm.
thing. And so like, I'd be interested in kind of the parallels of like, you know, the end of the 2010s to like 30 years earlier. Like I think there's something there. But I think like the 80s kind of gives us this unique reflection of like what that the end of that previous world order felt like.
Yes, and I don't disagree with you. I think sort of bouncing off what you're saying, it's really it always struck me as bizarre, and certainly in hindsight, that you're right. Everything wasn't great in the '80s, politically, economically. There were, we were having hard times, but the music is like popcorn. It's like escapism. It's like
Yeah.
theater. It's so bizarre that the top 40 songs were so oftentimes in contrast to what was happening. Uh, as
Yeah.
a kid, you didn't notice it. You just, you focus on the music, but I don't what strikes me, to your point about the COVID thing, I always fascinated because I don't know that I feel like the '80s had a lot of joyful music in that way. A lot of it was
Oh
just,
yeah.
happy and celebratory, or even if it was about something down, there's something up about it and bright about it. I'm curious if I don't feel like we've had periods of time like that. I feel like I don't really listen to popular music that much, except for my kids play, and I just find some stuff. It seems like it's really bumming me out, especially I'm a hip hop fan. Hip hop is like it's all this really sort of slow and minor tones, and it's not really about anything important. I don't know.
Because hip
Um,
hop is like emo now. Like
yeah,
hip
yes,
hop used to be like the most braggadocious, like
yeah,
Right.
I've got this, I've got that, and now it's emo. Like it's
yeah.
literally like I'm sad, and that's what the kids want to hear. I get it. Kids are sad. Teens are sad.
Yeah, I'm
Like,
wondering if prior to COVID, even September 11th had created a sort of
yeah.
downturn in what people
Oh
would
yeah,
like to hear.
totally, totally.
Well, I know you guys got to run. I'm sure you got something important to do, and that's exciting for us because you keep working out there. So again, thank you so much for your time and the work that you've done, and certainly, for my audience in particular, keeping this '80s property alive in a way that most it is. There's maybe one other sort of show that's pulled this off, or movie, where you've got these reboots and sequels that just don't hit because of the lack of connection to the original material. And that's not true for Cobra Kai and the work that you did. So thanks, guys. Appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. This was really fun.